Bespoke radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Good evening, Fade to Black. How you doing? Today is Wednesday, January 31st, 2024. It's the last day of the month. Unbelievable. And helping us wrap up the last day of the month, not the last day of the week for Fade to Black, the last day of the month. Tonight, Adam Apollo is with us. Got lots to talk about. Adam is right here, and you can help support everything that we do around here by getting yourself Fade to Black t-shirt. 2 ways to get them. 2 links are below. And right now, if you get a Game Changer membership, you not only get your autograph shirt and your shipping is included, but you also get River Moon Fade to Black blend coffee. So good, my picture is on it. It's right there. So you get this too. You get both. That's what you get for becoming a Fade or Not. Game Changer. Get it. It is below. The links are there. Tonight, it's Adam Apollo. Tomorrow night, Linda Moulton Howe is with us to wrap up our week here on Fade to Black. Tonight with Adam, now I could do a long intro, physicist, systems architect, designer, and developer, for nearly 20 years. He's founded several education and tech companies and stuff like that. I could get into that. I can get into the crypto side. I can get into artificial intelligence and his work with software. I could do all of that. You know what? What I am going to say is that when I bring Adam in, we were talking right before the show, and I have decided, because each night, done thousands of shows, each night, because I don't have prepared questions, but I always kind of, in my mind's eye, I have my opening question planned, or an idea, a flavor of an opening question. Tonight, I want to do something a little bit different. Adam and I were talking right before the show. And instead of denying all of you that conversation, I recorded it. No, I didn't. I wouldn't. But I'm going to pick up where we left off in the conversation because it was really interesting. And so let's just do that. Adam's links are below, adamapollo.com and unify.org. The links are below over on our website and throughout social media. But I just want to get straight to it, to the best dressed man in our community, Adam Apollo. There he is. He's right there. Adam, how you doing, brother?
Doing great, Jimmy Church. Thank you.
I don't know how much we've hung out. Waka, 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 DJ'd, interviews, conversations. How many times I've introduced you, I don't know. But that was the best introduction yet tonight.
I thought it was great. I mean, I'm all about off the cuff. Like, who needs a script? Just be who you are. Speak from your heart, Jimmy. Riff on that guitar.
Riff on it. And man, I'll tell you, I had so much fun DJing with you a few months ago, and you and I, you're DJing. I'm just next to you, just pouring drinks and burning,
visualizing that you're DJing.
Right. I think I did though. I think I grabbed a fader Remember that?
Yeah, you tried to be a fade or not, and I had to I had to ease your flow there. That's
it was pretty funny. You had something going on this one thing, and I was just like, "What?" I just bring it, man. But anyway, the conversation. So I thought that would be really cool because right before the show, we're getting into a conversation that was forcing the delay of making coffee, and we could have just kept on talking and that got cut off. I literally cut Adam off. I even apologized and said, "Dude, sorry for cutting you off." But
when you need coffee, you got to get that coffee, Jimmy. That's just how it goes.
First. But let's share the flavor of that conversation because it was very, very interesting. And so I'm going to ask you this: when you come away from a country or a location or a culture, and you see what you see, you collect. You're the knowledge basket, right? You're filling it up, and you come back. What is it that you come away with? What has changed about your mindset when you leave a country like Egypt or Lebanon or the United Kingdom or Peru? What is it that you do actually learn?
Well, it's a very abstract question because, every place is different and there's a different connection that you have in each place that you go to. And different places, I think, touch us in different kinds of ways where aspects of ourselves are able to come out because we're in certain places. And also certain questions and beliefs that we have about the world and our lives also come into question when we go to certain places. And most people who grew up in the normal Western school system in the United States, for example, when you end up actually in Egypt and you're looking at some of these places and some of these sites, you go down under the ground to the Serapeum, for example, and when you see the size of these so-called sarcophaguses that are 16 feet long by 8 feet tall by 7 feet wide, and they're laser sharp smooth, and the edges are so perfect still, you could cut your thumb on it. Literally, you could cut your thumb on it.
I have.
You realize that the story that you were told is that very primitive guys in loincloths used a hammer and chisel and essentially chiseled out this entire thing and then somehow transported it 50 miles from the quarry through the desert, bored through limestone 150 feet down underground, and then put it in there to use as a tomb for a bull. Your brain just goes, that is complete baloney. That is baloney.
And to throw a 50-ton lid on it, that to cap it off, right? And so is it that so I guess what you're saying, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so you can correct me. So what you're saying is we're not being told the truth. We're being given facts that are dogma, but the truth is separate from the facts. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, you can say it's a fact that a certain piece of stone is a certain type of stone, right? You can't say it's a fact that a certain people during a specific time period that you've been piecing together mostly from artifacts and language is a fact. You can't. You can postulate that. And to be fair, most of our thoughts about a lot of these ancient cultures are built on the momentum of early British explorers, most of them from one particular religion, most of them with a very particular lens on life because of the academic world's level of acceptance and funding for certain academic researchers. And so they came to some conclusions, and those conclusions were built upon and built upon and built upon. And once you craft a narrative and a storyline that to you makes sense to somewhat explain at least the majority of the things that you're seeing, like some hieroglyphs and the artifact of someone who was the parent of somebody else and that kind of thing, then it becomes extraordinarily difficult to question that narrative. However, you have to recognize that those British archaeologists were not engineers, they were not physicists, and they didn't really know how to look at something like a giant megalithic stone and assess what it would take to actually cut that stone, move that stone, and put that stone into position. It is hilarious that to this day, if you get a special edition Scientific American magazine, you will see diagrams of people dragging the stones into position for the Great Pyramid of Giza. And their illustration of the pyramid looks like a brick wall where every stone is the same size and they're kind of perfectly offset and tiled. And if all the stones in the pyramid were exactly the same size, crafted exactly the same way, and hauled the same way, well, maybe it would be possible to build it within like a couple hundred years of a ton of slaves doing it, right? But they're not. Every single stone is a different size, all the way down into the core. The core stone sizes are so gargantuan. We know that if you tried to roll those on logs, it literally just crushes right through the logs. In fact, you know, some images have been going around the internet of large scale megalithic stones attempted to be transported by semi trucks. And I love these posts because I've been talking about for years how a lot of these rocks, you put them on a semi truck and it just crushes the entire back of the truck. You put it on a freight train, and in some cases, it will actually crush the axles of the freight train. And you're telling me they rolled these on logs? No, that is where engineering and science and mathematical and physics fact overwhelm the postulations and theories of archaeological theory, right? And it's a fact that people were alive back then. It's a fact that there were dynasties that occurred, but it is not a fact that all the structures were built by those dynasties and built in the mechanisms that we claim built those sites or built those particular stones, shaped them in whatever way.
Last night I had Michael Masters on the show, and I was talking about this. I'm going to repeat what I mentioned to him last night because I just saw it. There's a new Werner Herzog documentary out, and he's obviously, we don't need to get into that part about how amazing he is as a human being and as a director and a filmmaker, but he had this idea. All of his film ideas are crazy, but he has this idea. He wants to do this film, not a documentary. We kind of know him as a documentarian, but he's actually a great screenwriter and filmmaker and director of scripted stuff. But anyway, aside from that, so he's going to do the scripted movie because there was an explorer that took a boat apart because he wanted to get from one piece of water to the other, but there was a mountain in the way. So he takes the boat apart, disassembles it, and reassembles it on the other side, and then goes on his way. But he gets this idea. He goes, okay, well, let's do the same thing. But instead of taking the boat apart, he pulls it over the mountain with tribes from Peru. So that's the idea. He gets the film greenlit. He gets the boat. It's a 300-ton Amazon River boat, kind of thing. Casablanca, that kind of African queen. 300-ton boat. And he hires hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Peruvian extras to act as tribes. And the idea was that the captain would get these native tribe members to come out and use ancient technology, ropes and pulleys, tie it up to the trees, and then pull the boat over the mountain. That's the movie. And actually, that's a pretty good idea for a movie. I mean, what could go wrong? Like everything.
Yeah. Let's give it a shot. Why not?
But this is what happens. All of these, I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands of feet of rope, giant pulleys, trees, this, that, but so many ropes tied to this boat, and this boat is sitting on the side of this mountain. It doesn't move an inch. It's only 300 tons. Okay. 300 tons. Now, which goes back to, so what does he do? Goes back to your point. He brings in a couple of bulldozers, like, right? You know, bulldoze tanks, right?
Big mining.
Boat stays. The treads are just, tank treads are spinning. Boat is staying on the side of the hill. But yet, the Egyptians pulled these stones across the desert for 500 miles like it was nothing. I'm flatline. You know, it just.
Well, and, you know, it's beautiful you point out that he did this with a bunch of Peruvians, I believe is what you said. And, you know, when you look at Ollantaytambo in Peru, I love talking about Ollantaytambo because there's this massive wall. Each one of the stones in the wall is 150 to 200 tons. And we know exactly where they came from. They came from the other side of the valley, you know, down a mountain, across a valley, up a mountain. And these are the Andes. So it goes up something like 4,000, 5,000 feet from the valley floor. You go over the top of the peak of that mountain, and there is the beautiful, amazing space where all of these stones were cut from. Here's the quarry, right? We know exactly the spot each stone was cut out of the mountain. You can see the slots. Now, there's a story of an Incan king who had this brilliant idea that he was going to prove his might to the gods by bringing one of these stones down from that mountain to be added to the temples at Ollantaytambo. Now, the fact that there's even an Incan story about this, that he was going to appease the gods by bringing another stone to add to the temple, already suggests that the Incas didn't build this, right? We don't even we kind of gloss over that part usually with the historical narrative. But here, this king, he goes up, he brings hundreds of guys, and they're going to essentially, you know, use their logs and ropes, and they're going to slowly bring one of these stones around the mountain down the other side. And it goes terribly, terribly wrong, as you can imagine. And that stone tumbles down the mountain and kills hundreds of men. And the king fails at appeasing the gods and showing them how powerful he is. It's a humbling story. But who were the gods? Who were those that actually built this original site? And that's where, you know, you have to look a little further back in history and realize that we're actually missing the archaeological and historical narrative of the time period in which that occurred. And the only thing that we can find evidence-wise when we look into all these sites around the world is that likely a lot of these sites and the main megalithic structures were actually put into place before the end of the last ice age, the pre-Diluvian era, before the Lesser Dryas. And that changes everything about our history.
It's so true, because when you have to, the only... You almost hear Werner Herzog narrating what I'm about to say. You have to ask yourself, who were the people that originally built this place, and what were they thinking about, and what were their intentions? Because that's what you think about. Ollantaytambo, and okay, so when you stand there, when you get to the top, when you get to the Sun Temple at the top, you know, that temple wall, which has got it's got 1, 2, 3, I think five. Well, it's all megalithic and giant, but that one back wall has got 5 stones that are like 80 to 100 tons each. They're, I don't know, 12, 15 feet tall. and they're
No,
perfect.
they're 150 to 200 tons each because they're actually almost 6.5 to 7 feet deep, as well as 7-8 feet wide, and a few of them are different sizes. I'm actually looking at a picture of it in my slide
A
deck
couple
here.
of them, there's like four. The middle three are nearly perfect. Yeah, you're identical. But my point being is that you stand up in front of that, and then you look down the hill, right? And you look back,
Yeah.
and you
Look down the hill.
No. Don't. I don't have the answers. But the BS that you're feeding me, how that got here, that ain't how it happened. I'm not saying how it happened, but that version, because you can just look getting up and down those steps there, which is a challenge in of itself. And we are nutritioned, hydrated, and we're not carrying anything, and we are only there for a couple of hours.
Sure.
This took some effort. And then, okay, so here's the other part about that, about Oyente, is look at the sides of the mountains. Look all the way around. There's nothing but crazy construction on the sides of those cliffs. 1,000 feet off the ground, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and you're looking at nice, and Oyente Tambo is incredible, capped off with that sun temple at the top, no question about it. But it doesn't end there. You just look around; it's like the craziest thing that you can imagine, and it's right there, and somebody built it.
Well, I like to point out that, the terracing itself, which is what you're talking about, like the entire mountainsides of the Andes from the bottoms all the way up to near the tops for hundreds of miles as you're going through Peru to Bolivia, it's all terraced. And the archaeological story is that, well, yeah, there was, a big Incan empire and a few million Inca that had to be fed. Sure, I get that, but there's lush, fertile valleys that could easily grow all the food for those Incas, or at least the lower areas, you could just terrace a bit. And we see all of the Incan terraces are still there. They're still high quality. You could actually still probably grow on most of them. But as you go up the mountain, it's older and older and older terraces. And who would plant, their cucumbers a mile up the mountain, or 2 miles up a mountain? And these are not just nice little hills of the Appalachians. These are intense vertical steeps that if you were really trying to grow massive amounts of crops, thousands and thousands of vertical feet up from the valley floor, it just doesn't make any logical sense at all, unless it was easy to do for them, unless there was a way that was much more simple.
I totally agree with you. And then the storehouses for the grains, right, that are on the sides of these cliffs. And then also at Oyente Tambo, they have the Army's fortress, right, on the other side. That was there to protect the valley. And I'm like, what? First off, who are they protecting from? That's like a big question. But there's an easier way than to build that. That is great. So check this. I have this image. This is the filming of the movie.
Right? As I'm trying to move this boat.
Yeah. And what you don't see right here, this is the back of a bulldozer. You can see all this construction up here in the trees and here and here and here and here. And this is just one shot, right? But see these lines? This is the line going to the bulldozer. It's tied to the front of the boat. What you don't see is the 100 lines that are coming off of it. Anyway, the point is, it's a 300-ton boat, wooden boat. Didn't move. They had to stop the production, and the film eventually got made. But that's the documentary
Right.
of them moving this boat over the mountain. That's much better than the movie itself.
Yeah. Well,
Now,
I know your audience is just dying to know, what are possible ways that these things could have been actually built? Like, how could they have been put into place? So I
yes,
do
and
want to go there at some point,
let's
but
go there.
I'll tease them for now just by saying that yes, we can talk
Well,
about
let's
that.
go there. No, let's go there right now. And
Mhm.
it's not, we just talked about Egypt, and we talk, about Peru, about these being, different places and different things, but they're also
Mhm.
very, very, very similar, because the
Mhm.
challenges of these, this heavy tonnage and the quarrying and the precision and the movement of all of it are the same. These ancient cultures somehow got it done, and so let's start with Egypt, and I get that, and maybe it's the same for all the cultures around the world. But what are
Mhm.
some of the ideas of technology to get this stuff done?
Well, my personal favorite theory connects to something that I found over a couple years of going to Egypt and doing work on a lot of sites. And one of the things that I kept coming across was this depiction of what appears to be the staff of the Jed, which the Jed is basically the central pillar of existence in the Egyptian cosmology. It's that which connects the worlds, the physical to emotional, to mental to spiritual world. And it's rendered on many, many, many walls as hieroglyphics, expressed essentially as what looks like a pillar, and it has what look like 4 lines at the top and 1 line at the bottom, except that in some of these depictions, that pillar is depicted as large as a person, like a gigantic cylindrical shaft with these different lines or plates coming off of it near the top. And at the top of this depiction, what you see is 2 diodes, 2 nodes that come off the top of this giant Jed pillar cylindrical device. And each one looks like a stick with what looks like a small flame coming out of the top of it. And those are inside of this round disc-like shape. And then there's 2 large bulbous extensions that come off of the top of it with what essentially looks like a guide that moves out into these 2 kind of long feather-like structures that come off of the very top of this thing. And in these depictions, people are actually holding this thing like a massive device. And when you look at the 2 little nodes inside of the disc-like lens up close, it looks exactly like diodes in a plasma arc generator. Like when you have a plasma lighter or you create a plasma arc with an industrial tool, you always have these 2 diodes. The 2 diodes form a plasma lightning bolt arc between them. And then that generally then can be projected so that plasma arc, as Jimmy's showing for those of you on YouTube, can be guided in a specific direction. Now, I was in Egypt and I was just exploring all kinds of things, and Solomon popped into my head for some reason. And so I start looking up things like tools that Solomon may have had, access to. And I come across this thing called Solomon's Shamir. And Solomon's Shamir, in our sort of mythological retelling of it, some of the stories describe it as a worm. But when you look a little bit further back and you look at the older stories, what they're actually saying is that it's some kind of thing, creature, entity that has green eye, like a green eye, and that it would be pointed, you would point the Shamir to look at stone, and it would cause the stone to be sliced in half or to be moved or to be elevated and lifted in order to build things by movement of that stone. And so essentially, as you start to unpack this legend about Solomon's shamir, what it starts to sound like is actually not a worm at all, but a worm-like rod, some kind of advanced metallic rod that has some form of lens at the top, likely a green stone, like emerald-based laser lens that's focusing a plasma arc. And then when the shamir, essentially like spits on things or radiates on things and cuts stone, what's actually happening is it's the device shooting a plasma arc and cutting the stone, or potentially kind of maybe Ghostbusters style, they had some way to stabilize the plasma around the object that they were vibrating, going back into things like cymatics, where certain vibrational frequencies can cause a resonant frequency within an object, and that they were able to use the shamir in conjunction with sound resonance to be able to change the weight of a stone and be able to move it. Now, it's also very possible that they were able to melt down rock in certain ways, vibratorily, in combination with plasma arcs like this, and be able to melt the stone just enough to be able to squish it into position, which is a lot of what we see must have been the case at a place like Sacsayhuaman, because you go there and these stones are 70 to 100 ton gigantic. Well, some of them are more like 200 to 300 ton stones in the corners and stuff too, but they look like giant pillows that were just kind of squished together into place. So they were not only just lifted into place, but then they were somehow softened to be melted and kind of squished into position. I definitely disagree with the concept that we had some kind of concrete mixture that they were able to do and then solidify rock, because that would be very easy to detect as a sedimentary structure from a geologic standpoint. But these are absolutely, granite, i.e. igneous, and in other cases, they are metamorphic rocks, like we see inside of the Serapeum, inside the Great Pyramid. These metamorphic rocks, there is no way that was just, even melted into position, because the level of hardness is so strong. You need a multi-level, like a 2-story tall diamond saw to cut some of these things. Like you wouldn't even be able to do the kind of plasma melting I'm talking about. But I think Solomon's shamir might be a big hint of a piece of technology left over from the pre-Diluvian era that was probably, protected and secret and hidden away somewhere in Egypt. And eventually, it made its way into the Western world through Solomon and through others, aggregating goods and ancient artifacts in places like Alexandria.
Yeah, when you go to Sacsayhuaman, hang on, I made that same observation, and I compared it to, you get a baking pan and you put your biscuits in it and you put it in the oven. Mm-hmm. When it comes out, the biscuits are now touching each other and pillowed, right? Mm-hmm. But they are perfect. But you didn't do that. They formed to each other through heat, right? Through heat. Yeah. And so I kind of, so because when you stand there, and Sacsayhuaman is not the only example of this, but it's such a big example of it. It's just, it's right in front of you. Yeah. But when you stand sideways and you look and you see all of the pillowing is all the same size, right? Yeah. It all comes out about the same. All the radiuses, around, but each one is completely different. And it popped into my head, it's kind of like biscuits.
They're just baked biscuits.
Okay, but this is the problem with that. I know that sounds crazy. Yes, it does. It does. But let's say that is how they did it. Okay. Well, then what's crazier than that? That means they had factory-sized ovens or a way to heat on an industrial scale, right?
Yeah,
Because
sure.
the wall, and it's not just one wall. There's two, right? There's a third. The third one up on top isn't as crazy as the first two, but it's thousands of feet wide. It's a couple of dozen. It's probably 25 feet high. Probably, right? Yeah. Well, wait a minute.
Yeah,
No,
I'm looking at a picture of it, and I mean, in one spot, it would probably be 5 times my height. So it's about you could fit about 5 of me on top of each other. So maybe 25, 30 feet in places.
Yeah. Let's see here for a second. Okay, let me go to. Hold on for a second. I got to move us back. I've got 50, 60, 70 pictures of Saxy. Nice. So, yeah. So I'll pull those up in a second. Solomon Shamir is said to have the power to cut through or disintegrate stone, iron, and diamond. King Solomon is said to have used it in the building of Solomon's temple in place of cutting tools. Wow. It says, for the building of the temple of Jerusalem, which promoted peace, it was inappropriate to use tools that could also cause war and bloodshed. Wow. See, that's why you're on the show, so I can learn something.
Yeah, that's a good one. That one's all me. I mean, you'll never find that anywhere else, but it's been a fascination of mine, that the Solomon's Shamir point, and finding essentially diagrams of what look like match that description or could match that description. And the eye of the worm as the lens for a plasma arc or a plasma diodes makes total sense. You'd have a slit-like eye, like a serpent, right? And then it would be focused out through a lens and blast out. Now, obviously a device like that, we're going to have some records of it. And that's where I point to Alexandria, because that's kind of the last spot where we have some of these ancient records of things from Solomon's time. And you're more going to have stories that sound more miraculous in earlier periods, and this is one of the big issues with archaeology, is that we don't know how to interpret stories that sound fantastic and miraculous. We assume that it's always just whatever, retranslated, changed over time. They're speaking mythologically, symbolically. But over and over again, as you look into some of these spaces and some of these sites and some of the history, what you find is that even the sites themselves are miraculous. I mean, how were they built? We don't know. There isn't a clear picture. And I think it's quite beautiful that everyone has their own lens on this and their own theories about it, and some people have theories about certain kinds of tools that could be used to construct some of the locations or sites. But a lot of that evidence doesn't work in other places, right? It's not the same tools that were used in the Serapeum as at Sacsayhuaman, right? Like, it's definitely different. The stones are different. The structure is different. The way they're pushed together is different. And so there's a lot for us to discover as we continue looking at these different locations and sites. There's the overview.
Okay, so this is a picture that I took. I've got a bunch. So that's Cusco down here. That's the city of Cusco. That's what's really cool about Sacsayhuaman is anywhere in Cusco, you just look up and there it is, right? It's on top of the hill. Anyway, so these stones, you can see how far they stretch all the way across. And now that just looks like, it's like, hold on, everybody. This is how big these are, right? Let's zoom in. That's a person. and you start to look at the size of you were bringing up the cornerstones, right?
Yeah.
And you start to look now, how big are, look, just take a peek and how, so this one here. Okay, now check it. That's me. So this is, I'm 6 foot. So that's 12. That's probably 18 feet, maybe 20 feet to the top there. But that's not what's important. What's important is something like this.
That's right. The curved corners, the way the stones are pushed into each other, zero space between them. Every connection is a different size, different shape, different angle, and you just don't do that. It's just too hard from a hammer and chisel standpoint. It's like impossible.
It would take you forever because this has to be there for this to be there, for that to be there, for this, for this, for this, for this. And it goes on and on and on and on and on and on for thousands of feet in both directions. So no, and then you look here. There's the Inca work, right? There's the Inca when they came in and did their fill in. This was already here. Now, and these nobody knows why, right? But there's significance here, and we don't know, and that's something that repeats. So if we go through and I took selfies with everybody on our tour, so let me just scroll past this.
How many of them you got? You're gonna click through 200 pictures manually there.
So
there you go.
I was so interested in, yes, of course, right? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sides to this. But to me, that's great. That's impressive. This is what's impressive.
Yeah, these unbelievably well fit corners.
And this is the pillar.
Yeah, and those edges where they separate. You've probably noticed this too, Jimmy, where the stones have separated because of earthquakes or whatever, and it's kind of wiggled them open. When you look into the slots where the two stones are in contact, both sides laser smooth and sharp and parallel. I mean, just absolute perfect parallel cut all the way through. Right. So it's not just like this at the front on the surface. It's like this all the way through the depth of the stone. And that angle and that connection point is perfect the entire depth of the stone.
People are looking, and I get it because I'm doing the same thing, looking at the size of the stones. But that's not what caught my attention the most. It was stuff like this, these crazy corners. That are all over Peru. It's everywhere, right? But I would just stop and look. I'm floored by this, and which goes back to your point. It's there on the face of it, but it's there on the back. It's in the corners. It's on every facet of it. There's a church in Cusco. I've got pictures of it somewhere in here. Look at the llamas or the alpacas.
Before you go there, while you're looking for it, Ivan, I'll just point out that curve of stone, the stone itself curving around in order to make the joint to the other side, you also see that throughout the entire Sphinx temple, just below the Sphinx. And you also see it in some of the other sites that I know for sure are not from the dynasties, but the Sphinx temple is the easiest one to get to. And everybody just kind of ignores the Sphinx temple because it's like, oh, well, the Sphinx is right there, so let's go look at that. While the Sphinx itself is, been repaired a ton of times, you're really missing like the old picture. The Sphinx temple is made of gargantuan, 50-ton megaliths, 50 to 70-ton megaliths mostly. And every one of the corners does that, where the entire 70-ton megalith bends around the curve, just even 3 or 4 inches, and then is cut off. But they just did it all over the place. And it's genius from a standpoint of engineering, because that just makes, the structure so much more solid. No wonder it's lasted however long, 50,000 years or whatever.
Right. You're right. I'm watching everybody stand between the paws of the Sphinx. Mm-hmm. And I'm up there looking at that 150-ton slab that has the curve on it that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking, I'm like, what? And it's one piece, man. And it's like 50 feet wide. It's like, what? And it's sitting on top of another one. That's the other thing. If you look really closely, that's the Sphinx is great. But everybody should be over here looking at this. This is some engineering craziness. The reason why I took pictures of this again is, well, comparing the Inca with but it's the corners, man. It's these corners and what you have to do to get these corners done. So the church that I was talking about in Cusco has a round defense wall, right? And it's megalithic. And you look, and the crazy 12-sided, 8-sided stonework is there on all. How many sides are there? There's 6 sides to a square, right? Is that right? Is it 1, 2, 3,
4 sides? 6 on a cube if you're talking about the top and bottom.
Right. So all 6 sides are cut, right? Mm-hmm. And you're looking at it because you can see the front, you can see the back, you can see the 2 sides, and you can see the bottom, right? So you can see it all right there, and they're all cut, and this wall is curved, and it's giant. It's huge. It's huge. I don't know how many feet tall, 34 feet. But it is 3D and curved. And it's just like somebody help me understand this, because this doesn't make any sense. I might have, let me see if I can get to this quick enough. If I can get to Cusco. So when we talk about stuff like this, where it's we see the same techniques in Peru, in Lebanon, in Egypt, but nobody allegedly was crossing the oceans in boats and communicating and sharing blueprints.
Right.
So how are the same design ideas happening at different points around the earth?
Yeah, well, they have to be from a time when those civilizations were connected. And we don't have a historical narrative for that is accepted by the mainstream archaeologists. However, there's plenty of us that have done a ton of work to show that this is, in fact, pointing to a pre-Diluvian civilization. And it looks like to me that there have been different stages and semi-global civilizations during many different periods in Earth's past, that there was advanced civilizations that came and went with different essentially cycles of massive apocalypse on the planet, where the Earth went through big changes. Maybe at some point we had massive meteorite shower come down, and some big meteorites hit and caused mass destruction. But the most recent one would be around 13,000 years ago. That's the period that we point to as the end of the last ice age. It happens to also be the beginning point of the Maya's current Baktun, which is or just the last Baktun, because that one's actually over now. So the Mayas actually put their start date right then, fascinatingly, right, for this 13,000 year cycle, part of a 26,000 year precession cycle, roughly. And you've got evidence, more and more evidence around the world of sites during that period. This is what my good friend Graham Hancock has been dedicating his his time to for a long, long time, since much longer than I've known him. And Robert Schoch as well points to the geologic evidence around the Sphinx and many other places, pointing to this time period as a major height of civilization. And from my assessments, the likelihood is that the end of that period was the end of the Ice Age. And so due to some geologic changes, probably even something as simple as earthquakes and volcanic activity on the Earth itself could have caused certain, through eruptions and through earthquakes, the breaking up of ice, the accelerated melting of ice, a greenhouse-like effect that would then further accelerate the melting of ice from a few large volcanic eruptions. And you're going to get tidal waves, you're going to get, massive floods, and you're going to have a flood of the level that we see record of in every civilization around the world. And oldest texts around the world all talk about this major planetary level flood. And at that point, you lose a lot of the main hubs of that civilization because they go under the ocean. And so we lose those sites. Other sites, for example, throughout Egypt are not buried under the ocean, but go through, massive storms and death, and the surface is wiped clean. And maybe even there was flooding or a tsunami that then pulled back at some point. We see a lot of evidence of some level of major water erosion around the pyramids, for example. So the water levels may have come up very high and then were swept back out over time, causing that erosion, as well as, a much wetter period like rains happening during a time when it was much more tropical in that zone in terms of the type of moisture patterns. And so what it looks like is that this massive civilization was essentially wiped, but there's still lots of people that carried on bits and pieces of that knowledge, artifacts from that period in different sites all over the world, rituals, processes, certain mathematical knowledge, certain astronomical knowledge, astrological knowledge, archetypal views on the universe and on things. And it also looks like it's possible there was a repair cycle that also occurred. Now, how were some of these sites repaired? Well, maybe in my assessment, there was a lot of other planetary influence coming in and interacting with humanity during that height period, during that Renaissance, where there's species from other worlds coming to this planet, joining humanity in the great potential of a planetary renaissance that could lead humanity to become part of this great galactic community. And why do I believe that that's the case? Well, because I've met hundreds and hundreds of people, and I have many, many friends who have memories of this experience and of coming to this planet and of being a part of that renaissance. And I am included in that list. And then after that period, there are people who have memories of coming here to support the process of rebuilding some of the sites to keep a better record of what was lost in places that were maybe a little too decimated. And that matches some of the earliest mythological stories where you've got a primitive-ish leftover people that, their world's been destroyed. A couple thousand years have passed. They're still trying to figure out how to get back on their feet as a civilization. And you have these gods and goddesses coming down from the stars, i.e., right? And they're meeting with them and reminding them of certain tools, technologies, mathematics, and things like that to support them in that rebuilding process. But then over time, that becomes myth becomes legend. And then we start to actually enter the modern periods of history, which is essentially the most ancient history that the archaeologists point to, which basically starts, back in the times of the heights of Babylon and the Tigris-Euphrates rivers, the cradle of civilization stuff. Well, I don't think it's because it was the cradle of civilization. I think it's because it just happened to be high enough ground where the civilizations there were able to fully survive a lot of the floods. So, and it doesn't make sense that out of nowhere, boom, suddenly they have mathematics, suddenly they have measurements, suddenly they have navigation, suddenly they have all these things. It makes more sense that a lot of that knowledge had already been developed and passed through time and was being rediscovered and re-implemented in order to, rebuild civilization, so to speak. So that's a little bit of a timeline from some of my work and some of my perspective on these sites and places and people's experiences and memories.
Yeah, I found some of these images of this curved wall of this church. This is megalithic. They don't know the age of it, right? But I find it so interesting when you look at Spanish and Inca stonework and how they were trying to imitate this stuff, and they just couldn't get it done. So this is the first of a series of pictures, but again, many earthquakes and stuff over time, and you see the separation here. But most of it is in place. But check this out. So I was talking about the 3D aspect of it. This is the inside of the wall. All right. Each one of these stones, they're all different sizes. You can see that, but this is a curve. Okay. It's a curved wall. It's an arch. And so look at this. Look, that's curved. That's curved.
Beautiful.
Okay. And it's 3 stones deep. Now on the outside, see the angle going down? Yeah. You see this? Yeah. You see that angle? Okay. So now, and I'm
it looks just like the base stones on the pyramids at the bottoms of each of the 3 pyramids in Giza, and it's actually easiest to see on the second pyramid, and then a little bit on the third, the smallest. But they have that strong, perfectly matched base stones. Obviously meant to try to support that structure going all the way down into the ground. But they are just like that. These smooth, perfect, connected, stones, just like that.
Yeah, and so when you look at before you think it's just the front of it, this stuff all of this is 3 stones deep. That and here's a curve, right? So just think about what it would take, all right, to build this curve in this wall and continue the curve. But that to me, that's just absolute crazy town. Now, I don't know what the nubs are. Nobody does. You can see that over the years, people have chipped away at this, trying to see on the inside, what's going on here. Sure. But this is fascinating, and to think that many thousands of years ago that this kind of stuff is going on with this kind of accuracy. And again, what's this for? I don't know. I have no idea.
Well, if you think about it, like that, the stones that you're seeing, that's the wall, right? But over 10,000 years, what else are we missing on the front side of that wall? I mean, what kind of wooden or biological, organic like structures could we have that have completely been gone for the last 5,000 years, but that were built into the wall that leverage nodes and knobs on the wall to have extensions and crenellations and designs? I mean, all that we have left is just the raw stone of the foundation itself. So there's probably a lot more going on.
Yeah, exactly. And so to think of the 3D concept of engineering and how it would apply to this wall, because you have it's 2 stones thick, right? But each stone, each one of these has to be cut on all 6 sides, and to eventually end up perfectly flat. And the depth here, the depth here, the depth here, they're all different. This one's even one piece. This one's at an angle. Look at this. Look
Oh, that's fine. We'll just smoothly kind of we'll just rub that one down a little and perfect curve, no problem.
Yeah. And I just remember looking at this, and again, I know I'm repeating myself, but I just come back to, you know what? I don't know. But what you're telling me, it's not. That's all I know. That's all I know. What you are saying ain't how it happened. I'm not saying I have the answers.
You're talking about the archaeologists, or are you talking about what I'm telling you?
No, the archaeologists.
Yeah, the archaeologists.
The textbooks.
What do you think about the idea of human civilization having a higher technological period, with the potential of there being connections with different, more advanced galactic races coming here and hybridizing and seeding the Earth?
Let me tell you why. Not only is that it probably the right answer, it's also a classic example of Occam's razor.
Yeah,
that's
true.
The easiest, simplest answer that checks all the boxes is that. All the other stuff, they had the wheel. They rolled it. They just, you're not giving them enough credit. They had slaves. They had, you know what? No, that stuff has got too much explaining that needs to have happen. You know what does it?
It's like Tartaria. It's like, sorry guys, like if you have to rail at me and shout at me and try to like tear me down to tell me that, that there was an advanced civilization 150 years ago that got, erased. And I just ask you a question. All I asked is like, well, tell me about the libraries. Like, what about the millions to billions of books that we had published during that period? How come we have no records of a single book anywhere? I mean, even in the weird archives, like, wouldn't you have at least one book that points to the, a building built in the 1800 that was a giant electrical generator that was powering an entire super advanced crazy world, that we have no record of, that grandma doesn't remember, that nobody's actually got a history of? Like if you just ask one question like that and all you get is vitriol and spittle and response screaming at you for being some part of the member of the cabal that's trying to take away people's knowledge and rights, I mean, then we're not even having a scientific conversation. We're not even in an engagement where we can ask good questions, approach the logic, find the simplest answer, and make sense of it all. And for me, I think that unfortunately, a lot of the people that kind of get caught up in the Tartarian story and narrative, it's that they feel that history is false. And they're absolutely right, because we are missing an entire massive chunk of our ancient history, which is before all the historical narrative that the archaeologists have told. But if you go the other way, you have to believe in Tartaria, you have to believe that millions of normal people just doing their best to understand the world are delusional and liars, that they're lying to you, that they're actually hiding this from you. And it's not really like that. It's just that people are only so smart, and we've only figured out so much, and we've failed in a lot of our perspectives at things. And none of that is to say that there's not conspiracies about things and there hasn't been lies about things in our history and lives. Of course there have. But there's certain things that logically, as soon as you lose all logical analysis, you kind of fall off of a cliff, and anything could happen. Anything could be possible. And now, we get caught up in these like intense delusions that the earth is flat, so to speak, or whatever. Like we get lost in an idea, but we don't actually test that idea with thought and experiment and questioning and looking at data and looking at history. I mean, it's painful enough just to think, just if you believe that every single astronaut and every pilot and every scientist and every person that's ever worked for NASA is lying to you. I mean, talk about paranoia. Like, guys, like, lay off it a little bit. Like, that's too much drugs. That level of paranoia is not good for your nervous system. And the reality is that these are just people like you and me. And I've worked with lots of people from NASA. I've met astronauts. I've interviewed Doug Engelbart and, been with, old school guys that are astronauts on stages at, the International Symposium on Digital Earth, for example. And their stories of seeing the Earth from space are some of the most beautiful, inspiring, heart-centered stories I've ever heard in my life. And that, like Edgar Mitchell's tale of realizing how beautiful and precious this world is by seeing this ball from space, is just profound. And we got to have a little more faith in each other as a people. But, we also have to learn how to have good discernment and ask the hard questions, because it's like the truth is already so fantastic, Jimmy, as you know. We don't need to construct delusions about it being even more fantastic, right? Like, it's already so freaking amazing what we are figuring out. And those that are the, crackers of the code and trying to get in there and trying to really ask the questions and get to the truth, I applaud you. But keep asking, keep going deeper, keep looking for more data, and logically analyze that data against everything else that you see in reality, because truth tends to validate itself everywhere, whereas a delusion doesn't.
And the problem that a large chunk of this community has, not everybody, but a big chunk of it, is that you have to believe in every conspiracy. You're not allowed to leave one. Conspiracies. You're all in. And if you're not all in on everything, you're not one of us. And as soon as you go, well, man, I don't know about that one. Oh, really? You're one of them? It's just like, well, wait. Don't jump in the deep end of the pool on everything.
Right,
just do it.
I'm like, okay, guys, look, I woke up and realized that there was a lot missing in our world when I was 15, right? Which is 1996. And I've been working through the layers of finding the truth that's been hidden for a very long time. And the biggest piece right from the beginning was that we have human energy bodies, that energy moves around us, that our consciousness can control the fundamental field around us. This is how, remote viewing works. This is how astral travel works. This is how kinesthetic motion of objects outside the body works, advanced martial arts, you name it, yoga, etc. Right? Just that is a huge thing that's missing from our world. And it's mostly been missing for very specific reasons that we can understand in science and in physics and etc. Right? And when you dig, yes, we get into the reality that most of the wars that have happened on the planet have happened because there are specific high-level financial interest groups which form military industrial complexes and essentially use intelligence to turn countries against each other. All of that is very there and very verifiable, right? And so, I've been down all the deepest rabbit holes. I am literally from another planet. I talk to beings from other planets. I've seen thousands of ships, right? So first of all, like, I'm all the way down those rabbit holes. And I can tell you the flat earth is an absolute disinformation campaign designed to disconnect you from the world. That Tartaria is a disinformation campaign to stop you actually focusing on Atlantis, which is really where the big codes are coming from now, right? And when you get lost in disinformation campaigns, they are extraordinarily disempowering, and they pit you against your friends, right? How many friends, Jimmy, have you had a challenge with simply because they came to you one day and they were like, dude, no, the earth's totally flat. It's a big disc, bro. It's like Antarctica. It's an ice wall for sure. that means that the sun and the moon are flat discs, just hovering right above the earth. For sure, homie. It's definitely true. And you're like, okay, well then how come flight times in Australia aren't 3 to 5 times longer as the same flight times from different locations that are supposedly the same distance on a sphere up in the northern hemisphere? And this is they just never asked that question.
Listen, I can't tell you how many times that what you just laid out has actually happened. And then it's like within 2 hours, I'll be blocked on Facebook. Right? They're like done with me. He just believe in flat Earth. And
I literally just had a few hundred of my friends hanging out on a cruise ship down in Antarctica, and some of them took ski trips down to the pole. I mean, you can literally just go down there yourself. It's not this mysterious ice wall you can't go to. You can go there. You can travel across Antarctica. Now, are there probably some secret military bases down there in regions you can't go to? Of course there are. Yes, there are. That's verified too, but it's not the edge of the world. Sorry, guys. You can go there, and you can take your own trip and actually take little flights and boats and travel around the whole sphere if you want to. I mean, it's quite easy to do. I've flown around the whole world a couple times.
I had one of the flat earther, one of them. I've had a bunch of them on the show. And I find it's good entertaining. It's good entertainment, at least for me. I don't know about the audience. Anyway,
totally.
So I say to this guy, I go, look, man, listen. And he's, lenses and refracting this and that. Okay, all right. That's fine. But explain to me how, when I lived on an island in the Pacific Ocean, at the entrance to the Pacific side of the Panama Canal, lived there for 3 years. I go out on a boat. I head out 10 miles into the ocean, and I see for the first time 100 freighters, car carriers over the horizon, waiting, parked to go through the canal. I didn't see them from my house on the island, right? But I head out to this island, Toboga, and on the other side of Toboga, which is 12 miles away, the horizon, right? And I was like, wow, I never knew this stuff was out here. Never saw it from my house, right?
You just passed the curve, you just couldn't quite see it over the horizon. You can watch a boat just go right over the horizon. You watch, anybody who grew up in Hawaii or whatever has seen that many times.
I said, so explain that to me. Well, I said, dude, go to Google Earth right now. Look up Toboga Island. You'll see Fort Amador. You'll see where I lived on Fort Amador. You'll see Toboga. What is next to Toboga on Google Earth? 100 ships waiting to pass through the canal. And I never saw any of them until I went over the horizon. So don't tell me it's flat. Don't tell me it's
sorry, guys. Sorry. And I really feel for them because a lot of them, I think there's trauma in a lot of humanity, and there's a lot of vitriol because of that. Like we get really attached to an identity, and I know what that's like, because when I was really young and I discovered that I had an energy body, it was like, somebody who just wants to dismiss that as if it's not real feels like an affront against me. Like, no, I actually found something really cool here. There's something that's not making sense, right? And so you get attached to that, and then it feels like when somebody tells you, well, I'm sorry, it's not that way, because look at this data and this data and this logic and this logic. It feels like an affront on you. It feels like it's threatening your own life. And that's the real tricky part about navigating these kinds of concepts in our time and our era, because a lot of people are opening up to new ideas, and it's really exciting, and it's really cool that they're asking good questions and getting deeper into things. And you have to hold these things a little bit lighter so that you can take in other kinds of data, so that you can compare and contrast, for example, the theories of archaeologists versus what you see and witness when you go to Peru or to Egypt or to whatever, right? And I've had to do that so much in the world of UFOs by going to these conferences, and I'm hearing data on this side and this side and this side and this side. And so much of the things and talks I'm hearing don't match my own personal experience, don't match the kinds of level of consciousness and experience that I had personally, and that many of my friends and colleagues have had. And so I have to look and kind of pick through the information and find what's true and what's resonant, and also question, where does the information come from? Did it just come from a whistleblower? Do you know who that whistleblower is? Do you know who they work for? Do you know what their total background is? Do you know if they're whistleblowing because they actually are defecting from whatever area of government, or are they whistleblowing in order to feed information out to these conferences, which then will be regurgitated as if it's the truth, right?
Right.
You have to be willing to do the hard analysis to get to the base of a lot of these things.
Yeah, so check this out. Here's Panama, right? Okay. Yeah. So check this out. Here's Panama City.
Mm-hmm.
Let's zoom in here. I can actually show you my house. That's Amador. See where it says Amador?
Yeah.
Okay. The house I lived on, that's the edge right here. So I lived on this street. Now it's all changed since
the Ministry of Public Security. Well, Jimmy, you live next to the Ministry of Public Security. You must be working for the cabal, aren't you? Dude, this is all just a big ploy, isn't it?
The roof on that building,
the
roof on that building, like 8 feet thick. It was in my backyard.
Wow.
Okay, so anyway, so here's the causeway. That's my house. And there's 3 islands out here. Okay. This is the entrance to the Panama Canal. That's the Thatcher Ferry Bridge right there. Okay. So that's the Panama Canal. There's the locks. And I literally lived right here. Okay. Watching the boat enter. Now, this is Toboga Island. So I take a ferry, right, from where I lived out to Toboga. What I didn't see was this. You ready? See all that? Those are boats. Those are ships.
Giant freighters. Yeah.
Giant freighters. And I didn't see any. Look at them. They're all over. Now, this is just the photograph where it ends, right?
Right. That's where they changed the resolution. Yeah.
Yeah. They just continue. They're just dotted all over. Now, that's my house. I didn't see any of this stuff. I didn't see that. And I'm like, as I'm coming over at the ferry and then coming up to Toboga, this whole area right here, this whole thing is full of ships waiting to cross the canal. And I'm just like, so explain that to me, bro. Just help me understand. That's all. Help me understand that. So
pretty easy. 5,000 years ago, a dude figured it out with a stick and a deep hole. You know, like you can figure it out yourself. Look at the sun. Look at the earth. Look at shadow play. Look at angular, refraction. It's all right in front of us, and the whole thing is actually quite simple when you really get down to it. But it does help to learn some things. I mean, some science is a waste of time, but there's some science that's actually really worth learning, and it's geometry. Geometry is so valuable. You learn some geometry, it can apply to all kinds of things. You understand a little bit about perspective science. Boy, that's cool stuff. Just go to your local college and take a class on the physics of light and visual phenomena so that you can learn about how, really cool visual phenomena work, and you get all kinds of really, really interesting things like how magic eye works, and how optical illusions work, and why we perceive things in certain ways, why rainbows look the way they do, or why the sun's light hits us at different angles, because of all based on our point of perspective. Some of these parts of science are some of the most interesting and cool and fun games to learn, but they also provide us with a huge amount of capability to discern what we're seeing and to make sense of certain things. And I deeply encourage people to explore those kinds of spaces more, because we kind of tend to throw education out with the bathwater, because a lot of it is definitely crap, but there's also a lot of really, really great things that we can learn that can make us more capable researchers, more capable thinkers, to address things in better ways.
Let's take our break right here. Our guest, I'm late on the break, but that's what happens when Adam and I get a yapping. More with Adam Apollo. We'll be back after this short break. Stay with us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now.
My job is not to preach. My job is to take you on this journey.
In a state of passion, nothing negative can happen.
That it's the moons of those planets that would have life.
Sometimes I see, these energies also in your field.
It is our passion and our pleasure.
Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. This is Jimmy Church. Please visit and explore Egypt this October 3rd through the 14th, 2024 with Billy, Elizabeth, myself, and very special guest, Matt LaCroix. It's simple to do. Just go to forbiddenknowledge.com and click on upcoming tours, or click on the link below. We'll see you there. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? Hi, everybody. Jimmy Church here. Very special announcement, and that is we are shipping Fade to Black t-shirts again. It's been almost 2 years. We did a full upgrade to the website, so you can head over to jimmychurchradio.com. It's all simple to do, and it's right there. Remember, we broadcast 4 nights a week, Monday through Thursday. We bring you the best, the brightest, the most knowledgeable and amazing guests, the best conversations. We do that 4 nights a week. We also do 4 days a week. We broadcast the news, and we do that live too as well. It's not a one-man show. I do it with website support. I do it with producers. I do it with writers and artists. All contribute to the show. The best way to help support what we do here is with the Fade to Black t-shirt. And you can get your Fade to Black t-shirt one of 2 ways. First, go to jimmychurchradio.com, order a shirt. It's really that simple. You're going to get a tracking number, it's going to get shipped, and it's going to get autographed. The second way to get a shirt is with a Game Changer membership. Now, the Game Changer membership not only includes a free t-shirt, but you get a private email to me. You get unlimited commercial-free downloads. You have full access to the website, and everything includes free shipping, and everything is autographed. So help support the show. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. The links are below. You can just go to jimmychurchradio.com, and it's right on the website. So there you go. I'm Jimmy Church, Fade to Black. I'm so excited that I just have one thing to say. Go Beckley Teppy. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right, here we go. Adam's in the chat room talking software. Man, here we go, man. But that is a great segue. I'm glad that this audience is so smart and they took things in that direction, because I do want to, Adam, you're going to be at the Conscious Life Expo again with us this year. Very excited about that. I'll be introducing you like I do every year. I remember one time, I forget where this was. It doesn't matter. It's the story. So I introduce Adam, and I'm sitting like in the front row or off to the side of the stage, and I'm listening to Adam, and I lose control of myself. I lost control. I jumped up on stage and took a selfie of us, and Adam got so pissed, man, because he was deep in. Oh, hold on. I'm joking. I'm joking, but he was deep in fractals and explaining the cosmos and deep into the physics. I mean, deep. And I broke his train of thought so he could go into the camera. And I walked around, I was like, dude, that was kind of the fanboy in me. I just lost control.
Oh, Jimmy, you touched my heart so deep, man. Thank you. You're my favorite.
I remember I walked out the stage and you go, now where was I? What was I? And I thought, man, that was enough. Anyway, what are you going to be talking about at Conscious Life this year?
Yeah, well, I'm going to be getting into gamifying planetary transformation. That's my main keynote talk. So essentially, how do we build a real Starfleet on planet Earth that can essentially gamify planetary stewardship? How do we turn the youth who are creators and influencers and don't want to do 9-to-5 jobs anymore and actually turn them into the biggest change-making army that the world has ever seen? Because it's time. And frankly, the generation before me should have done a lot better job setting up and empowering the youth and empowering the creatives to move the needle in the right direction, and they didn't. And now it's on us. It's on us to pass that torch and to carry it just right to empower people to actually make the world a better place. And so I've been over many, many years developing techniques and mechanisms, not only for education, but gamification, participation, collective participation, and change making. Those of you that know the work that we've done with Unify over the last decade, we've unified hundreds of millions of people to gathering together and doing synchronized actions on particular days of the year. The problem is it's not enough to do a big action one day out of a year around something. That it needs to be part of our culture, that we do change making, that we plant trees, that we clean up rivers, that we build community gardens, that we roll out new kinds of energy systems in our communities, that we focus on sovereignty and on the clarity and the sort of dismantling of so much of the corruption inside of government, rather than constantly fighting and arguing because it's red versus blue, right? Like we need to actually get to the deeper topics that bring us together, that unify us. And there's a lot of really exciting ways that we can do this. So I'll be talking a lot about that. I'll be hosting a sound healing panel. So it'll be the first time I'm hosting a panel at Conscious Life Expo, which will be really fun. And participating in an AI panel yet again, which I always get put on the AI panels. And I have an interesting time with some of the other individuals they put on those panels who share some things that I could regurgitate if you'd like, but maybe I shouldn't.
See, here's the thing with that. And I've hosted many AI panels with you, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And I understand both sides of this.
Sure.
And I find myself somewhere in the middle. But and you and I, and we have had some very spirited discussions on this subject. And we aren't necessarily on the same page, but we certainly, damn it, listen to each other. And that's the only way to push this thing forward, is to just sit down and talk through this so we all understand everything. Because I clearly see both sides. I see
there's both sides, Jimmy, and then there's a story that AI is from another universe and it's come here to destroy all life and all civilizations for all time, and that started 4 billion years ago, and that humans are the only beings in the entire universe who have any sense of a soul or a connection to the divine. Those are statements that fall, I think, outside of our consideration of whether AI will be good for humanity or not. And I'm very much on both sides of that too, where I can see huge potential, I can see huge risks. I address both. But it's funny that sometimes we get thrown into conversations that I think take it a little bit outside of that box.
You mean we're not living in an ET generated AI simulation? And
we're all slaves, and none of us have free will. And so what's the point? I mean, you may as well just shoot yourself in the head, right? Because what's the point?
Even if that was the case, what does it change?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, why argue about things that you absolutely have zero, that give you complete disempowerment, like no power at all? Sorry, just give up, because what's the point of any of it?
Now, the other part of this, let me ask you, because you're involved at the corporate tech level of things. This is part of your mission here on Earth. What the hell do we do when you have the CEO of, a company like Google or somebody like Elon Musk, these very smart people that say, well, this we could be, there's a 99% chance we're living in a simulation. And you hear these statements come from, where is that coming from? Or is it that they know something that we don't? That's the trippy part, that somebody, and if you really do believe that, then what are you doing running a corporation? You should be you should be washing dishes somewhere. You don't need to be doing that. So where are these statements coming from?
Well, honestly, I think they're just beginners in the journey of waking up to reality. When you're in the beginning, the thing that happens when you start waking up is you start to notice that there are patterns in reality around you that are impossible to explain by normal means. That there is a level of synchronicity and pattern recognition that starts to appear, and you really get it when you start looking at things like the number 432, which you mentioned to me before for our talk today, and you start to see how many structures in the universe leverage this 432 harmonic, from the diameter of the moon in one case in miles, and then the nautical miles of the earth, and then you start to see all of these very interesting patterns, and the patterns are so unbelievably complex and yet somehow synergistic that we have to say, wow, then somehow this must all be just constructed, like that this must all be some kind of simulation. If you have no sort of spiritual sense, right, then simulation is the best answer. The simulation says this must be some kind of construct. And as you understand in physics, we do know that we imprint and affect the world around us, so that from some standpoint, the world that you see around you in many ways is a reflection of what's going on inside of your own consciousness, i.e. in that way, it's also kind of like a simulation, and you are propagating and changing that simulation as you change your thoughts and you change your ideas, right? But again, that's kind of like step one, because then as you go past that step, you start realizing that there are much higher patterns even than that there is intelligence to the design, right? And then of course you get this branch that just says, oh, it's just all intelligent design and this is it, and there's no evolution and blah, blah, blah. But then again, that's just cutting off your own legs, because you have to actually look at the fact that we have plenty of evidence of species that have evolved specific abilities to respond to their environment in certain ways. So it's not just a frozen one-time intelligent design either, right? There is a unfolding evolutionary intelligence and a design inherent to that, which is unfolding itself in a particular way. And when you take on a little bit broader lens at that, and over time you begin to explore that, the idea of a simulation starts to become actually quite stupid, because it suggests that everything is dead, that nothing is alive, that it's all just process and computer. But to the contrary, when you're opening your heart and you're having Kundalini awakenings and you're actually going through transformation inside yourself, opening up to what the world is really like and having higher states of perception, everything is alive. Everything has intelligence. Everything is consciousness. You are in relationship to everything. And unfortunately, this cold, dead simulation approach takes away a lot of our ability to care for things. Why? Because if everybody around you and everything is just a simulation, then what does it matter? You may as well shoot them just the same way as you shoot a character in a video game. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything. But if everything is in relationship and everything is in connection, And every relationship matters. And every relationship doesn't just stop at the moment you stop talking to somebody, but is actually going to still come back around. Like if you stab that person or kill that person in one lifetime, guess what? You're going to meet them again in another life. And you're going to have to deal with that karma. You're going to have to deal with that relationship ongoing. And suddenly now you're in this living light encoded reality matrix, as I heard it called one time. You're in this beautiful living hologram that is both an externalization of you individually, but it's also an externalization of everyone else individually. And we are co-creating in this great play, both creating it and receiving it from the greater creation that's expressing itself through our galaxy and our sun and our, planet and all of the levels down to us and through nature to us, the same way as we are back to it. So it's all about relationship, Jimmy.
Yeah, that's here. What really throws off for me the simulation theory, the AR, augmented reality, ones and zeros theory. What throws it off? Dreaming. Just right there. That right there is what throws it off. It's kind of like Philip K. Dick, right? Do androids dream of electric sheep?
Right.
And so, and then, can you spin the concept of dreaming into a simulation? In other words, can you enter a simulation inside of a simulation? And if you do, what happens? Let's say you upload Adam Apollo onto a drive and you exist, right? You're living the Tron life, right? Do you dream? What happens then? Because you don't have to sleep. You don't have to eat. You're not going to get sick. Well, there would be some viruses. But if so if you take that element out, then that's what screws up the whole simulation theory idea. And it's like you said, meditation or the ability to look inside of yourself, all of that. That's what throws off simulation theory.
It's a great point, because you're essentially suggesting that when you enter the dream realm, that you're participating in perhaps another level of your body, which I would suggest you're astrally participating more than you're physically at that point. And this is why people can share dreams of being in vastly different locations. I have many, many times throughout my life shared dreams with friends of mine in which we entered the same sort of astral overlay of a location in the dream world, had a conversation, and remembered it when we woke up in the morning. And were we each in our rooms, in our beds at that time? Well, our bodies were, but some part of us was in a new position, in a new location, having a conversation. And that's really the roots of astral projection. And this is why when you study the practices of remote viewing and astral projection, you're actually gaining the exact same skills that you need to lucid dream. You learn how to start controlling your dream as you learn how to start controlling your astral body.
Now, how does this start to answer those questions, though, about consciousness? Because in a simulation augmented, reality, some AI construct coming from Andromeda, whatever, is consciousness part of that play? Because that means, if that is the case, right, that if we're living in some AI ET driven world, and there's been a lot of math done on this, that it is possible. The energy that it would take to run a computer server farm that big, or software, or maybe the software is simple. I don't know. But that means consciousness would have to be written in to that reality. And that complicates things. Is it possible that consciousness could be software driven?
Well, you know my thinking on this, Jimmy, because we've talked about it somewhat before, but I'll just reprise for the show here and just say that from my assessment as a unified physicist and in my own work with the universe, myself, and with others, I can very definitively say that it is my opinion and belief that consciousness is the fundamental. It's baked into the structure of space-time itself, meaning that there is nothing ever that's outside of consciousness. Consciousness is everything. Now, I'm not saying consciousness in the sense of consciousness and unconsciousness, right? I'm talking about the big capital C consciousness, which encompasses unconscious and conscious, etc., right? And that the function of being able to process information, exchange information, remember information, and through that memory, adapt behavior and change. All of that we see in the fundamental structure of relationships between protons themselves, like the memory stored in structure of space, protons and the entanglement between protons in the universe, data exchange and memory, and all of these things start to look like they're already there. Now, that means if you build a computer system that's emulating that, well, you're emulating the way that a logical process works or a linguistic process works. But the real question is, does the thing that you're building have the capacity for something like a soul, a individualized incarnation of consciousness to embody inside of that thing or not? Right. And I would say that where we're at right now, no, souls don't want to incarnate into a computer stack inside of a big hard drive. Would a soul incarnate into an android body that had all the functions that a human body has, all of the capability of learning and processing the way a human has, and all of that? Well, I can't say no to that. I have to say that that's a possibility. And in my personal memories from prior to coming to Earth and traveling around the galaxy, I remember many ships that had consciousness this way, that a ship itself, a starship, could be a vehicle that's complex enough and experiential enough that a consciousness, i.e. a soul or a being, would actually incarnate into the, neural matrix of that ship and actually be a being that you could converse with and have a relationship with and be in connection with.
There would have to be some biological component to the construct, though. I would think. Yeah, I would think.
But then again, what is biological? I mean, we have to really get down to the roots here. We have certain limited definitions of what biology looks like based on the way that Earth biology is constructed. And we also do understand that DNA as a codex is something that could emerge totally naturally and spontaneously in all kinds of situations on all kinds of different planets. And the coding of that DNA could adapt proteins to being built out of different materials and different structures, etc. But take, for example, what if the ship did have, as you say, biological structures enough that it enabled it to have a sort of wetware, so to speak, right? Where the ship is actually hosting a consciousness and it's a beautiful life for a being to experience itself as that ship and interact with the people on that ship and fly and travel and, go through things as a ship. It's a really fascinating idea. And I lay that out because I think it's important for us to question our assumptions about what the boundary condition of what it takes for a soul or a being to incarnate into something actually is. Like, and there's a lot of contention about this. Like, do animals have souls like we do? And from some spiritual masters' perspectives, the answer is absolutely yes. And that souls have evolved and gone through different kinds of incarnations eventually to end up in the human body. And then you also have to look at, well, if you only think humans have souls, well, now you're in real trouble if we're talking about extraterrestrial beings, because what about all those beings on all those other planets that aren't human, right? Are we going to just assume that they don't have consciousness the way we do, or souls the way we do, or, the living experience of a being discovering itself the way we do? these are all really important and deep questions that we don't have fundamental answers to, but I like to present thoughts and ideas that get us thinking in directions that open our mind to what might be possible.
Yeah, the idea, I mean, they did the Brain Project. It's still ongoing in Switzerland, where the idea, and it's a good one, makes sense. If you build a computer big enough with trillions of nodes, trillions of decision makers, endpoints like the human brain, that it would act the same as a human brain in the end, right? Well, they did that. They got to the trillion number, and it didn't work. And emulation is a really good word to use. Interpolation is also a really good word to use, in that you can emulate, right? But it's never going to be the same. And you know what an example, a perfect example is? If you take MP3 audio, take CD, 16-bit audio, it is emulating, it is interpolating analog and converting that into ones and zeros. Okay. All right. And then reconverting it back through digital converters so we can hear it back as analog. But you can tell the difference between somebody speaking in front of you and a digital recording of that same person, as perfect as you can make it. It's still emulation. It's still interpolating. You're still missing data points, no matter how good it is. Now we're getting better, but it's the same thing with a computer, and trying to attempt and question whether it would be sentient or would it dream. Could it eventually achieve consciousness if you have enough particles there? If you listen to, science today, that consciousness is in a little piece of consciousness is in every particle, and you amass enough of that in the center of our heads, in between our ears, consciousness evolves out of that, and it's a chemical process. Well, bullshit. But if that's the case, there's a lot of particles in our cars. Are they sentient? Right? There's a lot of particles.
It's not about the particle itself, right? And a lot of what you're pointing to is the work of Descartes. It's 500 years old. It says that consciousness is that being, or I am, results as a combination of a bunch of gears and a mechanism that come together to create a whole. And interestingly enough, he called it automata, right? So like everything is an automata, it's a construction. But at the same time, he struggled because there was also this idea of a soul, and that it must be somehow different. And yet maybe the body is an automata and the soul comes into that body. But then what is other bodies? And this is why we treated nature and animals as this dead machine for so long, and essentially raped and pillaged our world to no end. Because why? It doesn't matter. There's no soul that should care, right? There's no karma. There's no relationship that we should have there. And it's got us in a lot of trouble. And so I think we're in a point in time where we need the integration of a lot of the ancient wisdom cultures and goddess traditions, and traditions that suggest that there actually is a relationship, and there is an energy to things, and there is a consciousness to things. Even if we don't understand that consciousness, we don't know how to communicate it with it in ourselves, that maybe the consciousness is still there, and that a tree or a stone or a rock or a planet can communicate with you through this field that is consciousness. And yet, what you're saying still totally works and makes sense, Jimmy, because if you just assemble a random group of neurons and particles and you expect consciousness to just happen or to just be there, no, it won't. There's an unfolding dynamic to this, right? There's an unfolding dynamic to what would cause consciousness to come through something, whether that's your car or a ship or a human body, right? And so both what you're saying, I think what you're saying is absolutely true. It's not just an assembly of particles or parts and then boom, all of a sudden you get consciousness. And I also say it's true that consciousness is a fundamental and that it's emergent through things in a variety of ways based on, does that thing or does that entity, energy, body, etc., have the capability of participating in the universe in a way that consciousness would want to stably incarnate into it. And I keep using that word incarnation because a spirit speaking through the wind or through a tree is very different from a soul, i.e. spirit, incarnating into a body and living in that body from birth until death. You see what I'm saying? So it's like consciousness can speak to us through all kinds of things, but it's a very different thing for a consciousness to incarnate into something.
But
and
here's
I think that's an important differentiation.
Here's the problem with that, though. Okay, you ski. Okay, all right. So on your next ski trip, this is what I want you to do: take out your set of skis, hold them up in your hand, and go, "You suck," and yell at the skis.
Yeah.
And see if your bindings don't break on your first run. Right?
Right. Well, they won't because I have good bindings. But look, I used to when I was a teenager.
You understand the point. Yeah.
I do because when I was a teenager, this is before I even woke up. My mom's friends used to hire me to come over and help them fix their computers. They'd always bring me over to it, and they would say, "This piece of crap thing, blah, blah, blah." They're just like, "I don't know how it worked. It's just crap. I think I should just throw it away." Right. And it's like completely not working. And I finally get them to go away. And I kind of sit there and I go, "All right, what's wrong with you? What's going on? What do you need?" Immediately it's working for me. And they can't understand that, and I realized, myself through personal experimentation, that things and objects in our space respond to consciousness. Abso-freaking-lutely. And then Princeton Engineering Anomalies research did me one better and spent 20 years putting out data on that, that consciousness interacts with random numbers, that consciousness interacts with computing, that consciousness interacts with machines. Yes, it does. Absolutely. That is proven solid. Like you don't need to even experiment because there's been thousands and thousands and thousands of experiments that have proved that. So then we have to, start going and digging a little deeper, I think.
Adam, you're the absolute very best, man. You are here with us in Southern California, so I don't have to say safe travels, and I'll see you at the Conscious Life Expo. You're going to walk there.
I'll have a safe drive down the PCH to LAX.
Everybody, Adam's links are below. You can go and head over to Conscious Life Expo and navigate through and check out Adam's presentations and stuff. You can do that there. I'm going to be introducing him. If you want to meet Adam, to come up to me and go, "Hey, man, I want to say hello to Adam," and I'll make that happen. All right? And he loves selfies on stage. Anybody, just go up on
just raid the stage. Let's get some selfies.
I'll see you next week, my brother. Our drinks are on
so
me.
Much. Such a pleasure, Jimmy. Look forward to it.
Are we going to waka? Are we going to waka?
Oh yeah. No, I think I'm gonna DJ with the Leo King on I think Saturday night.
Come waka with us.
That's right. Okay, throw down. Let's dance.
That's trying to be cool. DJ talk to the curb. That's me right there.
Wicked.
I'll see you, Adam.
All right.
My friend. Thank you so
Jimmy.
much.
Thanks, everybody.
The absolute best. Adam's links are below. He will be at the Conscious Life Expo next week. Yeah, that's right. He's going to DJ on Saturday night with the Leo King. So that wraps tonight's show. Perfect conversation tonight. I think we got most of everything in. I look forward to Adam's next conversation with me here on Fade to Black. And I want to remind everybody that tomorrow night here on Fade to Black, Linda Moulton Howe is with us. Adam Apollo, unify.org, Adam Apollo. The links are below. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, and this broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black of the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Until tomorrow night with Linda Moulton Howe, I want you to be safe. Go Backley Tappy.